Hello and welcome on Across Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné. Our top stories today. More than 9,000 people killed and millions displaced, and yet Sudanese face no respite from bloodshed and terror, according to the UN. 6 months of war have plunged Sudan into one of the worst humanitarian nightmares in recent history. We'll have a special report. The end of the state of siege in DRC has come as a relief for many in the North Kivu and Ituri provinces. We'll get some reactions from Goma. And it's fashion season on the continent. Kibera Fashion Week just ended, an opportunity for local fashionistas to showcase their favorite pieces in the country's biggest slum. Sudanese face no respite from bloodshed and terror, a statement from the United Nations as the conflict drags on. 6 months ago, a conflict erupted between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, plunging Sudan into one of the worst humanitarian nightmares in recent history. Bastien Renouille is our special correspondent and had this special access into West Darfur.
Behind me, civilians from the Masalit community are dying. I'm 30 kilometers from El Geneina, the capital of West Darfur, where the main atrocities took place during the past months. The Rapid Support Forces and local Arab militias are responsible of these killings, and I can see them a few hundred meters behind me. They are in military trucks watching the border with Chad. These members of Arab militias are targeting the Masalit community, an ethnic African tribe. They have killed hundreds, if not thousands, of men, women, and children. According to the United Nations, they even dug mass graves to bury the bodies. Here in Chad, I met with one refugee who participated in the collection of the bodies, collaborating with the Rapid Support Forces.
Every morning, we started by gathering bodies outside in the street. First, we had to count them. There were 50, 60, 70, depending on the day. It was forbidden to take photos. We could only work and nothing else. We loaded the bodies into a lorry, one on top of the other, like goods. Once there were 80 bodies in the lorry. We asked, "Are you going to bury them properly, each in a grave?" They said, "No, we're going to put them all together and cover them with soil." We asked where they were going to bury them, but they didn't want to answer.
To survive, many families have decided to escape from West Darfur and El Geneina and to seek refuge here in Chad. More than 400,000 people have crossed the border behind me. More than 200,000 people are currently in the city of Adre. Among them, 85% of women and children. Here there is no fighting, they are safe, but they are still in dire need of help. In the camps, they live in makeshift shelters. They lack water and food. The healthcare system here is not strong enough to help them all. So international NGOs and the United Nations are trying to help them, but they say they lack money to do so. So they are all calling for greater international assistance to save these refugees.
And to get more on the story, I'm joined by Michael Dunford, Regional Director for Eastern Africa at the World Food Programme. Welcome. So what is the latest situation on the humanitarian ground, on the ground?
As your story has just reported, we have a catastrophe on our hands. Over 20 million people who are acutely food insecure, over 6 million people who have been displaced, both inside the country and to neighbouring countries. This is a crisis inside Sudan, and it has the potential of also becoming a crisis for the region.
So there's talked about ethnic cleansing. Can you confirm? Have you seen any evidence of that?
I haven't personally. I've heard reports, and I hope in the near future there will be investigations to determine to what extent that is true. What we know, however, is that populations have been targeted. There has been deaths. There has been people who have been displaced. And we are now, as the World Food Programme and others, trying to meet the needs of the population. There are large swathes of the country that we simply cannot access, or we cannot access at the scale required. So this is a conflict that must end. International humanitarian support must be given free access to reach the populations. And then hopefully we can have a political process that will put this conflict behind us and will provide the foundations for a long-lasting peace.
So given the situation, how can the humanitarian aid be organized?
So the World Food Programme and others have capacities in country, but the situation is so complex. We don't have many more operations globally today that are as complex as the situation in Sudan. When you look at the size of the scale, the needs in the country, we are trying to reach over 7 million people, and yet we only have access to probably at best half the country. We're trying to run convoys in from the likes of Chad up from South Sudan, but each and every one of those convoys needs to be negotiated with parties to the conflict. It's hard, it's slow, and it simply is very difficult to scale up to the extent required.
So what would you say the most urgent needs are?
So the World Food Programme needs funding. With funding, we're able to procure the food and start to move it into place if we have the access and the security. That's why a cessation of hostilities by the two parties is essential at this stage. Beyond that, we'll need water, we'll need medical equipment, and this is where the entire humanitarian infrastructure can come to support the population.
Are you, World Food Programme and also the other NGOs, are you in discussions with the two protagonists, the armed forces and also the paramilitary group?
We are having to negotiate humanitarian access with both sides. We're not involved in the negotiations for the peace per se, but for the humanitarian access, absolutely. We're having to talk not only with the two sides, but with other militia groups who are playing a role in the conflict. So it's not just two parties, it's multiple parties now. And as I said at the beginning, it's conflict inside the country and repercussions in the neighbouring countries as well.
Michael Dunford from the World Food Programme, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now to our next story. The announcement made the headlines last week in the Democratic Republic of Congo. President Félix Tshisekedi declared a gradual lifting of the so-called state of siege in two eastern provinces, North Kivu and Ituri. This exceptional regime gave power to the military for over 2 years. Aurélie Bazara-Kigbangula and Emmett Livingston report.
For over 2 years, the provinces of North Kivu and Ituri have been subject to this exceptional regime. Civilian administration has been entrusted to the military and the police. In some areas, curfews were imposed. In Goma, the capital of North Kivu, the president's decision has come as a relief.
We're really pleased with this measure. We are free. We can carry on with our activities as usual.
We haven't seen the benefits of all these measures. People are still in a state of insecurity. Across the provinces, people are still being killed.
The Congolese government introduced the state of siege in an attempt to restore peace to the provinces, but it's failed to stop violence from armed groups in the east of the country. In August, this MP from the ruling coalition took part in a roundtable to evaluate the state of siege alongside other politicians. They were all in favor of lifting it completely.
The measure is a good one. I note the president's flexibility and his sensitivity to the pressing demands of the population and elected representatives, but also his prudence in security governance, because the situation remains fragile in the east. The wish is that before the election scheduled for the 20th of December, we will no longer have a state of siege in North Kivu and Ituri.
President Tshisekedi's announcement comes after fighting erupted in some territories in North Kivu at the beginning of October, ending several weeks of calm. The clashes are pitting local armed groups against M23 rebels. According to the United Nations, more than 80,000 people have already fled their homes.
It's Fashion Week season in Africa. Lagos Fashion Week is gearing up to show off its latest creations next week in Nigeria. And in Kenya, Kibera Fashion Week came to a close last Sunday. The event highlights the designs of those born and bred in the country's biggest slum, a chance to change the narrative and celebrate creativity. Camille Nedelec has more.
Among the rusted tin rooftops of Kibera, models strode down the catwalk in local designs.
The purpose of Kibera Fashion is to be able to create opportunities for the young kids that are growing up right now, because we grew up in an environment whereby we never used to have things like that. Most of our parents used to see, like, doing fashion and design was not like an art, and they just used to take people like as tailors if you are like involved in fashion and design.
Just 11 designers out of almost 400 made the cut for this show, each with a different approach and different materials, from the usual suspects such as wool and cotton, to more unique pieces featuring pearls, metal and recycled materials. Rich in symbolism, some styles were post-apocalyptic and dystopian, while other designs featured large empty pockets, a jab at Kenya's overly educated, chronically underemployed youth. But if the designs were pessimistic, the audience was not.
African fashion is special and it's coming up, so I think we need to promote it with such events so that people know that we can be creative and you can come out with new ideas, and it's not just about Paris or Milan. Kenya, also in Africa in general, has talented designers, and we can have forums like this to showcase such designs to the world.
The outfits off the catwalk were just as eye-catching, with local fashionistas out in force in their favourite pieces.
And now, who said romance was dead? 1,800 couples, yes, 1,800 got married in a mass wedding. It's happening in Nigeria. The state of Kano State paid for all the expenses and gave customary gifts to the newlyweds. The aim is to help the poor get married. And that's it for this edition of Across Africa. Thank you for watching.